Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Draft. I'm sitting here with Frankie Abbott at Frankie Films. Make sure you're giving him a follow. He's killing the draft season right now. If you guys are looking for information on the Broncos prospects, there's not a better person to follow than Frankie Abbott. But we're going to have a really fun episode. It's going to be me and Frankie comparing notes on these players, where we disagree, where we disagree, or where we agree, where we disagree, everything in the middle of that. So I think it'll be a really good episode. Draft is so subjective, right? That I think it's going to be healthy to go through the little minute details of these guys, because I'm not so sure all of Broncos country knows what they're getting with everybody, with all the grades. It's like A, B, C. It's like, oh, he's good, he's bad. No one really knows about the players, though. So I'm excited for this. But before we start, Frankie, how are you feeling today?
Doing great today. Doing pretty good today. Excited to dive into it with you. Got my notebook on hand. We're ready to dive into all the players. Got a couple of days stuff loaded up, ready to dive into it. And, I'm just ready to be here, Joey. Ready to, talk some ball with you.
I love it. I love it. I love it. It's going to be a fun episode, dude. It's going to be a really good episode. We even have clips ready for some. You know what I mean? For a couple of these guys, the Broncos' first two picks here, we're going to show the highlights. It's going to be a good episode.
Let's get it.
Is there any, I don't think there's really, we usually start with news on this. I can't really think of any Broncos-specific news I feel like we should hit on. The draft is the most recent thing. The Broncos.
Jerry Jeudy's fifth-year option was picked up, I guess, is the most recent thing.
Okay,
I don't know if you guys got to touch on the Monday or Wednesday episode.
Well, I can tie it in with the draft.
There we go.
The Broncos picked up Jerry Jeudy's fifth-year option, but also signed or drafted Marvin Mims with their first pick in the NFL draft. Frankie, do you think that makes Jeudy safe? Because I think, the Mims edition at least puts a fire under some of these guys' butt. I'm just wondering who. Does Jerry Jeudy's fifth-year option, you think, eliminate him from these trade discussions?
I don't think it eliminates him from the trade discussions necessarily, but I don't think that the Marvin Mims pick correlates too much with Jerry. I think Marvin Mims kind of more so puts a fire under the butt of KJ Hamler, who might kind of already have his kind of final whatever written for him with that selection. But as far as the Jerry Jeudy pickup goes, thank God they did it. I think it's a great move by them. You get to have him for another year for $12 million, which is a great cost-controlled option. Him on the open market is getting you at least 17, 18, maybe $20 million. So glad to be able to keep him under that amount of money. And then I hope it's them working on an extension because, he's one of the few players on this team that seems to be entering their prime, can kind of be a true contributor on the next great Broncos team outside of guys like Patrick Surtain, whose contract you don't really have to worry about yet. So, great move for Denver, and I don't think that the Marvin Mims selection really hurts him too much, only kind of helps to bolster the entire offense.
So you think it's more of a Sutton thing that should be worried?
No, I don't think so necessarily at all. I think maybe, it ends up being just – I don't think all three of these receivers are going to be sticking around in the next 2 to 3 years. I think this kind of gives you at least the option to have one of them around for the cheap. Might as well do it. Might as well pick it up.
Hey, I'm not mad at that answer. If that's the way it goes, I'd be happy. I want all of these guys to go out there and succeed. I want my Broncos to be good.
Mm-hmm.
So if Courtland Sutton comes back and he's that guy we've all envisioned him being when he was a rookie as a sophomore, that would be fantastic. But Frankie, I do have to say I disagree a little bit. I think Jeudy is a little safer since you picked up his fifth-year option.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sutton, the fire is on his butt right now.
Due to the Mims pick or just in general?
Due to the Mims pick, man, I think that Jerry Jeudy is going to be better fit as a Z option with that versatility he has, being able to play the slot and the Z. I think Marvin Mims is a guy that the Broncos probably I'll get into the Marvin Mims a little later. We're going to get into it right after this. Maybe we let this segue into Marvin Mims here. I think Jerry Jeudy's position versatility, where I feel like I could line him up at any wide receiver spot, I don't care what these other guys are doing. That's the beauty of having a Jerry Jeudy. Like if you traded a KJ Hamler, that's fine. Jerry Jeudy could play in the slot role. Easy. That's where he was projected at best coming out of the draft. Last year, though, I thought he was better at a Z. I thought that was his best position. So I don't know. I do think that it makes Cortland Sutton a little, it's just a little scary out here, especially with him almost already being traded to the Baltimore Ravens, man.
Yeah.
That's kind of my take.
I
So,
guess in my mind,
yeah.
then he's not the only. Jerry Jeudy isn't the only guy I think that offers you that same versatility, though. In my mind, I think Tim Patrick is getting not nearly enough love for what he can be in the Sean Payton offenses, being like a big slot option, also being able to play on the outside. So
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, while I do think that the story is kind of a little bit written for Sutton in Denver, and I do think that if they start out slow, he's probably the first piece that they look to end up moving. I don't know. I don't think that Mims is somebody that's going to be threatening Sutton's snaps at all, really.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm not mad at that. I feel like with, Tim Patrick and Jerry Jeudy's versatility, as you highlighted perfectly, it allows the Broncos to play their best three. So while I also think that Marvin Mims, I think, lights a little fire under Cortland Sutton's, but I also think I could see a scenario where Marvin Mims is having a tough time touch the field. It goes both ways.
Yeah.
I can see either or. I just think you drafted him this high. The Broncos must think he's good. This is Sean Payton's first pick as the Denver Broncos head coach.
That is true.
In his vision. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I'm not. But let's lead us right into the Marvin Mims discussion, Frankie. I am curious what your thoughts are on Marvin Mims. I kind of highlighted at the beginning of this. We are going to compare our notes on him. Tell me first, where do you think Marvin Mims is good?
So Marvin Mims is an elite deep threat, as I feel like most of us know. 4.3 speed. He's averaged 20 yards per catch throughout his entire career. He's just been an absolute beast. Somebody that, you can rely on through the air at Oklahoma for his past 3 seasons. Inside-outside versatility, as we've mentioned. And really just someone that I think Denver's kind of needed to have, since they haven't been able to really count on KJ Hamler being healthy for the past few seasons. As I kind of said, I think after last year's kind of gaff in his health, we're not going to be able to kind of see the fully healthy KJ Hamler we were ever hoping for. He could be a possible trade candidate. But yeah, this is a guy that fights for the ball in the air, kind of plays a little bit bigger than I think you'd expect. As I've said, can make big plays from the inside, can make the big plays on the outside. He's someone that kind of stays alive when it comes to scramble drills and will make plays down the field for his quarterback. And just a player, I think Denver hasn't had a guy like this on offense since Emmanuel Sanders. And I think he, in the Sean Payton, fit, can be great. I think we saw last year how much it helped guys like Greg Dulcich being able to get open underneath, having these big over-the-top weapons that could take up safeties. I think this is the new guy to be able to put into that role. He's also going to be playing the kick return role, which is really needed in Denver. We haven't had a really guy we can be that is truly threatening in the return game, and it seems like, half a decade, close to a decade at this point. He can fit into that role nicely, hopefully go a little bit better than Montreal Washington did last year. And yeah, so I think it's a decent pick. I will say, though, I don't love the decision to trade up for him. I didn't have him ranked higher than other guys that did go a little bit below him, guys such as Cedric Tillman, Josh Downs, Jalen Hyatt. But I do kind of understand if they were really looking into a guy that did have this inside-outside versatility and did returning, he was truly the guy that fit that mold more than these other guys. When you talk about Tillman and Hyatt, they were more outside options. When you talk about Downs or Tank Dell, they were more playing purely out of the slot. So, yeah, I do think he kind of offers a lot of what you need in Denver, just not sure if I love kind of trading up for a guy that I don't think that they necessarily needed to if they were in love with the receiver class. But, it kind of is what it is. What do you think about him?
I'm going to echo a lot of your points. I think we're in lockstep about Marvin Mims. I'm going to start off with the player, and then I'll move into the trade just like you did. I think Marvin Mims, his vertical ability is really great. You have fast wide receivers, and then you have fast wide receivers that really don't know the nuance of winning vertically, though, right? It's not just all about speed, and I think Marvin Mims does a really good job with those nuances. He's great at tracking the ball down the field. That's one thing I noticed. He can adjust to where the football is going to be at a high level and get under it and catch it. That's a big deal of it. Not all the guys that you see run these 4.3s are doing that at a high level, but Marvin Mims does. I think another area where he differentiates himself from the average just fast wide receiver is that he can win after the catch pretty good. I think his vision after the catch stands out to me. It's not necessarily his ability to juke people out or stay on his feet or anything like that. It's his ability to see the other wide receivers blocking for him down the field, or his ability to find an angle. How can I best beat this defender just running with my speed? And Marvin Mims does a really good job as that guy. The last point I want to make where he differentiates himself from, just the average fast guy is his football competitiveness. That is blatant. I watched so much of his film this last season where honestly it wasn't very fun to watch a wide receiver prospect for me. It really wasn't, because I was watching Oklahoma with, I think it's Dylan Gabriel is their quarterback right now. Just so much wildcat. Dylan Gabriel also just wasn't getting the job done from what I saw. It just wasn't very good. Oklahoma quarterbacking, what you're used to seeing from the University of Oklahoma, Dylan Gabriel was not bringing. But in that, you saw Marvin Mims block his butt off a lot of the time. For such a small frame guy, he's not afraid to get into you and, show that football competitiveness. Is he the best blocker of all time? No. His body just won't allow for it. But you saw him playing bigger than his frame, which was exciting. I liked that. I liked seeing that from Marvin Mims. I think that transfers over in my mind when I see wide receivers doing something like that, Frankie. It lets me, I guess a little foreshadowing of what the rest of his game is going to be like. You know what I mean? Just that mentality. I can count on you to bring that competitiveness on every single down, and it doesn't matter what type of play. That dog, you're going to get that at wide receiver too. So I like seeing that from Marvin Mims.
Yeah, no, and I also just want to add on when you mentioned his ball tracking ability, because that's definitely a big point about it. But also one thing I really liked is he really looks to finish plays after he catches the pass. Like, he makes it so easy for himself to kind of run through passes. He's never kind of making it so he's like dropping as soon as he catches the ball. He's always looking to kind of get in the end zone after he makes a big play. And I always like something like that, where it's not just him looking to make the catch and go down. He clearly kind of sets himself up to continue making plays going forward. Always is looking has a nose for the end zone. And he's a really talented player once he gets the ball in his hands and with the ball in the air. And that's something that was really impressive for a guy of his stature, because he isn't the biggest. I do have concerns about him, though, going up against more press coverage in the NFL. This was a guy playing in the Big 12, wasn't really dealing with it so much when he would play on the outside, which he did more in 2022. But I think he might end up getting kind of forced to play more inside for the first couple of years of his career until he kind of bulks up a little bit, but that'll be foreseen.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as well. The negatives for me just are like the typical stuff you see. Thank God that this is small. It's like, okay, now you're worrying about his catching radius. I think he does a better job at that than the typical guy. But you're worrying about it. Like, he can't work outside this is his body and it is what it is. You're not going to change that about him. It's better than KJ Hamler. I'll say that. KJ Hamler really had a tough time catching a football outside of his frame. Marvin Mims can do it. It's not Calvin Johnson. You know what I mean? It's not Courtland Sutton. It's not Tim Patrick. I also think he was not immune to bobbling. He never had drops, but he did bobble. I don't know if that was really a worry or not, because it was never dropped, but
he did bobble.
He did bobble.
I like that.
That was something that was a little noteworthy for me. I wrote it in my notes. Yeah, and then the biggest negative I had from him, even working from the slot, when he was trying to work over the middle of the field, I saw him get pushed off his route a little too much for me. I want to see him really be able to work through that contact. And it's too many times a guy just came and shoved him, slows the whole play down, showed the sequencing of the play is now screwed up, the chemistry. But if it's a rollout right, you need to be, and you're starting on your left as a slot wide receiver and you're coming across field, that quarterback needs to see you at a specific time to be able to throw that football. And when you're pushed off your route, it screws the whole play up. And it's a 2-level read, like most of the time that is. It screws the play up. So he needs to get better at being able to work through contact, or another option, avoid contact. Yeah, one of the two. You have to get good at that. That was my biggest worry about Marvin Mims, if I'm being honest. Other than, like what you said, we never saw very much of him lining up outside with a press technique on him, and which leads you to believe that, hey, there's a good chance that this guy's slot dependent in the NFL. You agree with that pretty much?
No, I completely agree. How did you feel about the trade up? Were you okay with them moving up to go get him?
I didn't love the trade up for the same reasons you didn't. I don't think that there was a steep enough drop off at the wide receiver position to validate a trade. That's my main issue. When everyone's hyping up, and we'll get to them, our 7th round center. It would have been really nice if we had another pick, right? That was the last pick. It was 3 picks until the end of the NFL draft, and people loved that draft pick. It would have been great if we had one 50 picks earlier,
Yeah, because I mean, you look at the team as a whole right now. I think a lot of people are starting to recognize like this is the roster as it currently stands. There's some holes when you look at the depth. Like they don't have a swing tackle right now. They don't have Samaje Perine is probably penciled in as your day 1 3-down back, which isn't the best thing in the world. And he doesn't really have many guys to hand it off or to switch it between, like this team has definite holes in it, and they would have been easier to fill if they had picks to use in the draft. But,
Undoubtedly. That's my biggest thing and then also another thing I just want to add in. I'm sure the Broncos traded up thinking, hey, someone's going to take Marvin Mims between the pick that, we have and the pick we're trading up for. There was just no wide receiver taken at the end of the day between those 2 picks.
And there were many available as we've pointed out, like there were tons of guys available.
Undoubtedly. Let's move on to the next player here, Frankie. I want to talk about
a guy you love.
I really do like.
You might have to get a Drew Sanders jersey.
I wanted to troll you guys on the podcast. I wanted to bring on the Arkansas Razorbacks jersey. I was gonna put some that
would have been fantastic.
It would have been good. I agree. It would have been fire. But
yeah.
Amazon Prime didn't deliver until 3 days later, so I couldn't get it done. Anyways, tell me what you like about linebacker Drew Sanders. Took him in the 3rd round, 67th overall.
A lot of physicality, high motor, flies around to the football. Absolute kind of another one of those gremlin type players that just he knocks everything in front of him, hits it very hard. A lot of finesse in his hands to be able to get around offensive guards, get around a lot of blockers, and he just takes down ball carriers with a lot of ferocity. A player that is still learning to play the off-ball linebacker position a lot more. This is a guy who spent his first couple of years playing at a lot more of an outside linebacker edge position for Alabama before playing more of a hybrid role at Arkansas this last year. So a guy you're kind of projecting for a couple of years out for what he's going to be, but a guy that I think will be a serviceable weapon for his first couple of years in Denver, especially on those passing downs as a designated blitzer up the middle or just as a guy kind of spying the quarterback. Not necessarily a guy you want playing backwards too much, but a fun athletic player that I think could kind of start to kind of help build an identity on this defense going forward if this is what Vance Joseph wants to do.
Yeah. And I agree with you there, Frankie. I do worry, to Zach Seeger's point, because he's a little more critical of this pick, I think, than I am. Vance Joseph has not had the best success with these type of guys. I'm not going to throw Isaiah Simmons out there because I think Isaiah Simmons is versatile, but in the opposite way. I think that Drew Sanders is versatile in a pass rusher / linebacker way. I think Isaiah Simmons was, hey, I don't know if this guy's a safety or a linebacker. So it's pretty completely different when I really break it down. But what he is kind of close to is Zaven Collins, right? I think Zaven Collins was a little bigger. I think he was a little stiffer, but he was just as athletic straight line as Drew Sanders is. I even think that Zaven Collins was maybe a little bit better at the edge at coming out of college than Drew Sanders is right now. Vance Joseph has not had the greatest success with either of those guys. Zaven Collins didn't see a ton of snaps, a huge drop-off from his rookie season with the Cardinals. Isaiah Simmons hasn't really found his footing in the NFL. That's worrisome. I just don't know why Vance Joseph keeps going to this well if he can't figure it out, but here we are. He keeps doing it. But I'm not going to blame the pick for my just how confused I am with the defensive coordinator. I like Drew Sanders, the player, a ton.
Mm-hmm.
I do like him a ton. I think at the end of the day, he has a really great chance at being a fantastic player in the run while being able to affect the pass with his pass rushing. Those are two very valuable things. You're a middle linebacker. If you're an athletic freak show that can work sideline to sideline, you have a 6'5" frame to get all those tackle radius is insane. And then also I feel like you're very elusive, getting off of blockers, and you show the ability to be able to extend your arms, get your arms out there, punch him in the chest and shed as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has a chance to be an absolute monster in the run. Like you said, needs to get a lot better with his ability to process. I think he does a really good job at reading the lineman in front of him, just like a defensive end, like he used to play. Where he struggles is off of misdirections and stuff like that. That completely screws him up. He's not there yet at all, working through that mentally. I'm just kind of thinking that works its way out through more reps, but could be wrong. That's the big negative, though, I think, on him.
100%. Yeah, the processing still needs to get a little bit better, but you see the flashes of what he can be. And I mean, this is a pick where I don't necessarily want to, like, the positional value thing is kind of tough for this draft because, like, this team really needs an influx of talent. But when you do look at the roster top to bottom, if you were to say what position is probably the most secure, like when you talk about starters and backups, inside linebacker is probably the position that I would pick. Maybe receiver is a little bit better, but you talk about the receivers have kind of been, you might trade one of them this year. You're talking about some guys that are coming off injury or a little bit more injury concerned. When you talk about, you've got 3 deep in Denver right now. When you talk about Josie, when you talk about Singleton, when you talk about Griffith, those are 3 solid guys. Now you're adding Drew Sanders into the mix. There's the chance you're ending up playing him at edge rusher, but as much as that might be kind of cool, like, I don't know, in my mind, you're already kind of doing that with Baron Browning. I don't love trying to convert multiple players over to pass rusher at the same time. I also don't think there's
quick, Frankie.
What's up?
Can I add something to that point?
Yeah.
Quick? He failed at Alabama as an edge rusher. Let's just that, like that's kind of where it's like, okay, I don't understand it. He went to Alabama as the best high school edge rusher. That was his position coming out of high school, went to Alabama, played 2 seasons there and didn't really see the field. It took him to go to Arkansas to play off ball to where we see the player we're seeing right now.
Right.
I don't think this full-time edge thing is for real. I don't see
I see the vision. He looks better playing as off ball. Like, I have no issues. If he can learn how to play it, like, just get the better sense playing behind him, just kind of feel out for space a little bit better, he'll be good because his instincts and coverage, his athleticism, what impressed me probably the most about him was his change of direction ability. There were plays where, like I said, like, you're seeing quarterbacks kind of drop down and then kind of shift left and they're starting to roll left. And he's just able to kind of stop on a dime. And when you're talking about a guy that's literally 6'5", 250 pounds, kind of being able to stop moving, like, 18 miles per hour one direction, start moving, and he flies towards ball carriers. I mean, that's the big thing. When he locks on, like, he's like a heat-seeking missile. You kind of might hear that thrown around a lot. He really is that dude when it comes to going to getting guys. He's not the best tackler, but when it comes to kind of getting to ball carriers, he's very good. He needs to clean up his tackling a little bit. He needs to kind of learn to play the linebacker position a little bit more. But this is a player that I think can kind of really change the mold of your defense a little bit. And when you're talking about this is a pick for a year or 2 down the line, like, this is a perfect example of it. This is going to be your eventual Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, whoever they want to try to save money with in a year or 2. This is going to be that person. As much as it might suck for fans of those players, this team is kind of entering that period where they're going to have to start reloading because a lot of these guys are getting to be 29, 30 years old, upper 20s, have had an injury or 2 in the bag. So Marvin Mims and Drew Sanders are both kind of great examples of, in a year or 2, these guys are probably going to be the guys. We might not get to see them too much this year. We'll kind of get to see the flashes, but in a year or 2, these could be, or 2 or 3 years, these could be the faces of the Denver Broncos, like defense and offense.
Yeah, like this play being shown right now, I cannot wait for him to be a quarterback spy.
Right.
If it's a QB spy, is going to be illegal. That whole radius he has. I think these clips also show a good example, like that one right there, of what he's not afraid of contact.
No,
he's not a pansy playing linebacker. Like I see some people hype up sometimes. As these coverage linebackers, a lot of the time they're just guys that aren't very good in the run, and then they're kind of athletic in the back end. It's like, oh, you're going to be able to cover. Okay, but what can you do on first and second down? As much as I want that coverage linebacker, it's not a position I need to invest everything in the world to get. I don't want to have a third down middle linebacker and a first and second down middle linebacker. That's just like something that I'm not preferring. So I think that Drew Sanders has the ability. Frankie, to add on to this, what did you make of him? You said you liked him moving a lot going forward. You didn't love him going backwards. What did you make of him as a pass coverage linebacker, though? Does that go against like kind of where you don't love him?
So I don't really love him playing in one-on-ones. He honestly didn't get left to do it too much in the games I saw out of Arkansas, but not the guy you want playing in one-on-ones over the middle, but I don't think he's ever really going to be getting put into that situation. This is another, like, I think I saw Dane Brugler talking about it, like, this is a specialized offensive weapon for Denver, and that's a great thing to find in the third round, I think. I think if you can kind of take the things we're already talking about that he's good at and add another thing or two, like, I don't really think you're ever really going to need him to play in pass coverage. If you can, like the things we're talking about, where I think he just needs a little bit better feel in space when it comes to just kind of dropping over the middle, kind of feeling out, whether it's just like meshes coming straight across, things like that, where he just kind of needs to learn to better play that stuff out. But like, if he can get that under his belt, he's going to be a very effective off-ball linebacker. I mean, he's a guy that you're talking about how much you view him in the run game. I really think right now he's just going to be such an asset to them in the passing game.
Yeah.
I think him and the idea of like him and Josie or him and JL Skinner, him and a guy like, even if you want to bring Simmons down low a little bit, like I think that kind of offers you a lot of flexibility when it comes to just being able to cover everything and still have the speed to run down ball carriers if they're trying to do things out of the backfield, have enough ability to beat linemen if there's screens being set up, if teams are trying to go a little bit more jumbo on you. Really just an exciting piece. And I think one thing that is kind of interesting is as we start to see teams kind of reverting to, I think we're starting to see the Chiefs revert a little bit more to having these multi-tight end jumbo sets to kind of counter a lot of these nickel and dime sets coming out of the field. It feels a little bit like Denver either being ahead of the curve or just behind the curve. And it'll be interesting to see which one that kind of ends up being as the contract of Drew Sanders develops, because it could end up looking like, I think, a waste of a pick in a couple of years or a very smart pick, depending upon kind of how the league shifts.
Yeah, that's a great point. I never thought about it like that. So great point, Frankie. Let's
Thanks.
go on to Riley Moss, cornerback, Iowa, freak athlete. Riley Moss, a guy that comes out of a predominantly cover 3 system. You rarely ever see Iowa go in man-on-man coverage. It's like something I remember that with Michael Ojemudia coming out, was that I could find one man coverage rep through my film where he was doing that. So yeah, what do you make of Riley Moss? What do you like? Let's start there, just like the other guys.
Athleticism, a lot of experience, as you said, playing in a scheme that it seems like they're going to be running a lot of this year. I like all the special teams. That was another thing about Drew Sanders that I didn't get to mention. I think a lot of the experience is really cool. Another peak athlete. We talked about for weeks leading up how much I wanted them to get a couple of freak athletes to be able to properly utilize Christian Parker being in here for another year and Vance Joseph. They were able to do that, so now they've got a corner to be able to do that. I don't love the trade up to necessarily go get him. I don't love sacrificing what look like they're going to be top 100 picks. When you know that this team, as much as it kind of breaks my heart and might break Broncos fans' heart, a team that doesn't look like it's going to be very good next year, at least based on my optics of it and the moves we've seen them make this offseason. This isn't looking like a team that's really swinging for the fences. I think this team hopes that at the peak value, they can be like a 9-10 win team, but I think they kind of end up being somewhere closer to like 7 or 8, setting down some building blocks for the future. And if that's the case, you're going to end up wanting to have your 3rd or 4th round pick or whatever it equates out to being. You're going to end up wanting to have as many of those as possible. So I don't really love giving it up when I do think there were cornerbacks after him that I saw get drafted that I do like more. Guys like Mekhi Blackman, Keely Ringo, Clark Phillips, Jacorian Bennett, Darius Rush, and Jarrell Luter. Those were guys that, even though they're a little bit more man coverage oriented, I think they were very similar as far as pedigree goes, as far as the athletic traits go. And just guys that I think all could have gone like a little bit later, and you could have waited to pick at 108 to get them, and then you would have ended up having a day 3 pick extra for next season. So like the player, don't love the player, don't like the move. So that would be my stance on the Riley Moss pick right now. What did you think?
I'm going to start off with what I like. I think Riley Moss, obviously tall, physical. He, while struggles with tackling a little sometimes, and I think it's technique driven, he tackles more like a safety than he does corner, which is a good thing. We like that. When he's coming up to hit people in the run and he's coming up to play in the run, he's great at that. The way he hits, he has a little technique to get better there for undoubtedly. I'm not going to say he's the best tackling corner of all time, but I like the projection as him coming down as a tackling corner for sure. freak of an athlete, 4.48 40, can jump out the building. That was something that was blatant while watching his film, with so many of his past deflections were him jumping just ridiculously high to get a hand on something. That was so clear. Like, that's a big part of his game. I thought his ball skills were really good as well. He was an explosive player. He had multiple defensive touchdowns. This is a guy has had multiple pick sixes, which is good. He's a playmaker. I think there's a little value to that, right? As much as we could say it's luck, Riley Moss then has had a ton of luck. I don't buy it. Riley Moss has been good at intercepting the football and then bringing it back to the crib.
Mm-hmm.
Good at that. Riley Moss is very intriguing, although I think where he's really great in, he has deficiencies where he's just as bad in, I think, playing at the cornerback position. I value your ability to chop your feet and change directions at cornerback so highly. It scares me that Riley Moss, that's the area he struggles most in. When you have these shifty wide receivers running routes and stuff like that, you could see him turn his hips and have a hard time turning them back the other way. Ultimately, just getting cooked sometimes on different double moves. If he doesn't commit the exact right way, it's hard. The amount of time it takes him to flip the other direction, he's cooked. Now, he has the makeup speed, but it takes longer to get back into that than the average corner, is what I'd say. With that being said, if the Broncos are trying to run a cover 3 system where his eyes are looking straight at the quarterback, he's reading the quarterback's eyes, he's playing zone, reading the quarterback's eyes, we're going backwards. And yeah, we're just reading eyes and we're making plays on the ball. I love him in that situation. If we're playing man, where all of my reads are coming off what the wide receiver is exactly doing, I don't love it. That's kind of my stance. Now, on the trade, I hate it, but I don't want to dwell on that too much.
Yeah. No, and I guess I want to kind of echo what you're saying. It was the Ohio State game this year against Marvin Harrison, which Marvin Harrison is probably going to be a top 5, top 10 pick next draft.
That's a good one.
It was a lot of what you're saying, where Marvin Harrison was able to kind of enter those blind spots and cook Riley Moss, and he didn't have the ability to change direction and kind of shift his feet to be able to catch up to him. There were a few examples of that. I do completely agree. But, like, I guess the question then becomes, like, is this kind of a – how do you feel about him versus Damari Mathis this year if it comes to them, like, if it does come down to that corner 2 position, if they are kind of playing a lot more of that drop, cover 3 kind of eyes to the quarterback type of system?
I don't know how Damari fits in that. I'll be honest. I'm going to give it to him a little bit because I think he has the physicality to be able to compete in that. I think he has the athleticism to be able to compete in that type of system. I just know size is a big deal in that system as well. And Riley Moss clearly has the size advantage.
Yeah.
It's just true. It's a big deal in that. You want to be, they value these corners in these cover 3 systems. I can go back to that Seattle Seahawks days. I could go back to any of these cover 3 teams that you have seen play really good. Their corners are like 6'2", 6'3". That's just a trend. It is what it is there. While we have seen other guys succeed in it, Riley Moss does have the advantage. If that's the way they are running, I could see them being like, we need to add Riley Moss, who fits this scheme, I think, perfectly. If you're going to implement a Riley Moss, this is the type of scheme you would want to put him in. What do you make of it? Same thing or different?
No, I pretty much make the same thing where, like, I'm very high on Damari. I really like Damari. I love what he was able to do last year, but I do understand, like, I can understand the new defensive staff's maybe skepticism if they think they're going to be running a lot more of this that Damari hasn't shown the most ability to do. Did struggle as far as tackling last year, which was a big problem, and kind of wasn't the best as far as when the ball was in the air with, getting penalties and such. So I could kind of understand the shift if they did kind of look to play Riley Moss a little bit more. I wouldn't love it so much because it would kind of make the Damari pick. It would make the day 3 of last year's draft look even worse if they ended up kind of moving on from Damari Mathis so quickly. But I kind of understand it. But I'm also a big fan of, you need outside corners. I think 4 is the minimum you should have as far as guys you're comfortable starting in today's league. You need a nickel. You need at least 3 outside guys because there's just too good of a chance that these guys hurt. No, not at all. Like, not at all. It's arguably the most important position to have. I mean, outside of quarterback, obviously, it's the most important position depth-wise, I think, on a football team. you need guys that are able to cover in today's league. So I don't mind the pick at all. I just don't necessarily love the resources used to get it. The other part I wanted to throw out about it that I thought was interesting when you talk about him, you talk about JL Skinner, you talk about Drew Sanders a little bit, is their ability to, as I mean, you put it a little bit like to take the football away as opposed to just kind of hold these guys to short gains. I think that might be a shift we see from the Vic Fangio kind of Ejiro Evero era, where they weren't necessarily going for taking the football from you. They were going for minimizing damage, bend, don't break defense. We got so used to that under Vic Fangio, where it was so much more about having safe tackling, not giving up big plays, being able to play tight coverage, hopefully be able to get pressures and get sacks on third downs when you've been able to hold them to first and second, like short yard gains, where I think that could be a big shift this year, where we see the prioritization in our defensive backs to maybe take some more risks, but hopefully be able to bring down those interceptions we're going to see in the air. And I do think Riley Moss has that advantage over Damari Mathis.
Frankie, I just think you made a great point there. There is like a little big play ability to all three of these top three guys that we've listed here. Marvin Mims, obviously able to win deep on the deep ball. That's big play. That's game-changing play. Drew Sanders is a guy that forced a ton of fumbles. And then, hey, guys, he's an off-ball linebacker that led the SEC in sacks last year, or was tied with Will Anderson.
Had a couple picks, too, I think.
Yeah, he did. I watched one of them, then, was thrown straight at his face. And then, yeah, he was just big, and he was like, Bob, catch that. I'm like,
Bob.
And then really didn't do much after.
I hope he said that as he caught it.
Yeah. And then Riley Moss is a guy that has multiple defensive touchdowns. So I don't know. Yeah, the big playability from all
11 career picks.
That's pretty cool. I never thought about it like that. Good point, though. I think that wraps up our Riley Moss talk. Frankie, I know you love this next player, JL Skinner from Boise State.
He's kind of skinny.
He is a little skinny as well. The name is fitting. JL Skinner from Boise State, picked 183rd. Big, tall safety. I personally see him as more of your box safety that can cover. That's the way I'm kind of viewing him right now. Mm-hmm. Do you agree, disagree? And why do you love this pick so much?
So I just love the value here. JL Skinner was a guy that I personally had probably ranked in like the top 125, top 100 players. He just plays a very devalued position in today's NFL, which is playing that more box safety. He's a little bit limited to kind of being that more like Jaron Kearse type, that guy who's just going to be kind of either roaming deep in a deep third, or literally just playing deep, or playing like centrally over the middle, being able to cover tight ends, running backs on third downs. He actually has a little bit of ability.
By the way.
Hell of a player. Oh yeah. But I think he can kind of fill into that role. And a big reason he fell so much was because he tore his pec after the Senior Bowl, or during the Senior Bowl. Which, when you talk about an injury that, obviously you don't want any injury happening, it absolutely sucks for him. But as far as, he's a defensive back, this shouldn't be one that hampers him in the long term. It should be one he's able to recover from in 4 to 6 months. That's something that kind of, it's not the end of the world, and it was to Denver's benefit in this situation, because they were able to get a guy that I view as a 4th rounder, maybe 3rd rounder in the 6th round, a guy that you can maybe see being that eventual Kareem Jackson heir apparent, even though Kareem isn't here for the moment. Maybe eventually could become the Justin Simmons, though I don't think he has that good of side-to-side ability. But, this is just a great value pick for me. This is kind of a good example of what I wish they did a little bit more of in the draft. I'm fine with them incorporating the Sean Payton trade-up mentality, go get the guys you really want. But this is just this is what can happen when you're just a team that says, you know what, we don't want to kind of invest too much capital when we don't know what we are right now. We're just going to kind of let the best players fall to us and just add talent where it can be added, and that's what JL Skinner is. Needs to pack on a little bit of weight, I think, to play at the next level. Might kind of struggle getting beaten up a little bit, because he does play such a physical game that I do kind of worry that, I don't know, he's going to throw himself into an injury or something. But, this is a guy that just plays with his heart on his sleeve as far as from a physicality standpoint, an absolute tone setter. A guy who's able to get a couple turnovers for you, plays the ball pretty well in the air, and he's absolutely huge at 6'4". So, I mean, I'm really excited about this pick. Another guy that has a ton of special teams experience. So I can't wait to see number 0 in Denver, if that's the number he ends up getting.
Yeah, height. I want to make this clear. Height in these second level defenders thing is so often underrated, specifically at linebacker and safety. You can just like the difference between 6 foot safety and 6'4" is massive when it comes to getting a hand on the ball or simply just being in the way of throwing windows. Seriously, like it's a lot harder to throw or layer a football over a linebacker that's 6'5" or a safety that's 6'4". That's a tough thing to do. So I am a big fan of JL Skinner as well, Frankie. I totally agree. I think that Jaron Curse comp is pretty perfect. I'm not going to lie. I love that comp. So shouts out to you for that one. He's a guy that's going to hit you. He's a guy with the ability to cover. I don't think he's going to be like that man-on-man guy where he's flipping his hips. It comes with the territory of being this tall. That's just not his game. That is not something you can do as effectively. He's not Bryce Callahan out there with, he's not one of those guys. He's going to be able to get into his spots really good, though. And like I said, with his height and his athletic ability, be able to make plays that other guys just wouldn't being around the football.
Yeah.
So I really like this pick a ton, JL Skinner. It's a great pick. I rated this one an A. And I also kind of want to hit on something you said earlier about, hey, this is something that I wish the Broncos did more of, just kind of sat back and waited for these players to fall to them. All the players that I had rated the highest were players that they sat back and waited for.
Mm-hmm.
The players that I had rated the lowest were guys they traded up for. And I think that's pretty consistent even when you're looking at the national level. It's hard to make up that amount of ground in a draft. It just puts that much more on these guys' plates of, hey, you have to be worth not only the pick that you were drafted at, but also this other pick. Like it's in your head, in a fan's head, that's at least how they look at it. I'm not saying it's fair, but that's like the perception. It's hard.
And I guess that might feel dumb, like just to be like, oh, like are they not allowed to trade up? But it's really just like, unless like, I don't know. I guess it's really tough for me, especially when I'm majorly factoring in my personal rankings of these players. Where like, again, when I think about Riley Moss, I think I had him as probably like a top 100, maybe top 115 player. It's hard for me to really say like, oh, they needed to trade up and go get him at 83. When you talk about Marvin Mims, we talk about how many other receivers were available at that point. It's really tough for me to say, man, they needed to give up extra capital to go get him at 63 versus sitting at 67 and seeing if one of these other 5 receivers are available. Where I think that's just the main point of it. And again, like this is just a team that like, they don't have extra capital to burn. Next year, the Russell Wilson contract is going to it only gets bigger from this point forward. And like, they're going to have to steal money next year, like as crazy as that term sounds, they're going to have to find excess dollars out of these rookie contracts. And they're going to have to sign a cheap free agent or two that really works out for them, because they're having a quarterback right now that's on the 3rd or 4th highest APY value next season. It starts up, and I don't believe he's going to be playing up to that contract. I think most of us would agree he might not even be on the team next year. So it's kind of like, man, you're going to have to find stolen money somewhere. And it's a little hard to do that when you're sacrificing draft picks to move up to get the 7th best receiver on your board instead of the 8th best receiver on your board, because, oh man, he has maybe half an extra trait we like, I'm not trying to beat up on him, but if that's the process, like you got to understand, like that's why it's so worrisome for, I think, the fans that have been kind of watching these mistakes get made for the past 7 years.
Yeah. I mean, Sean Payton, man, he has not had a great history with the trade ups either. That's something I have to note. Marcus Davenport stands out, defensive end in the 1st round. There is one more. I think it was Cesar Ruiz, who has
We just got one of them, Adam Troutman. They blew 4 picks to go get Adam Troutman. Adam Troutman is now on the Broncos before his and I'm very excited about Sean Payton. But I think Sean Payton was a really good coach for a successful team. We have not seen Sean Payton necessarily, I'd say, coach teams through the storm so much. And I think that's something that we're kind of yet to be foreseen. And
it'll be interesting. And to the last pick, Frankie, Alex Forsyth, the center from Oregon. A lot of people are hyped up on my man's here. Some people are saying that they expect him to start coming out of training camp. How do you feel about this pick? Is it just like the 7th rounder of the century, starting caliber center, or what do you think here?
So thank God, I'll say this. Thank God they added somewhere to the trenches, man. If they went another entire draft, like it's funny, I forget what the analytics was, but it was basically like the top 3 teams are the teams that invest the most in the big people, like the Eagles, the Chiefs, like all these top teams. It's crazy. Guess what? They draft offensive and defensive linemen and they develop them and then they end up being good football teams. It's wild, you know. But Denver also hasn't drafted an offensive
Max, say
tackle
it
since
louder, Frankie. Say
2017.
it
Like
loud.
it's very disappointing. It's really like, you know, yeah, I don't know. But anyways, yeah, Denver added a center that has some guard versatility. I like him more than I liked the Wattenberg selection last year, so I think that's a plus. I think this is a guy that actually had a little bit of like possible starter upside when you look at him, but I do kind of, you know, when watching his tape, it is a little bit like similar to watching the Lloyd stuff where he's not the most powerful. He doesn't have really hammers for hands or anything like that. Doesn't bring a ton of size to the table. What he does have though, ton of experience. His pass pro is pretty decent. He's got like, you know, he's got a serviceable anchor. I think his feet are okay. I think literally the biggest standout trait you can say is his experience. You know, I don't think that there's anything that really is popping off the screen at you. This isn't a guy that's going to be flying off the screen. He's not like jumping off the snap at any crazy pace. He's not blowing guys up. But you know, just I think a serviceable rotation piece that could eventually develop into more. So solid pick for me. Another guy that they just let fall to him that I didn't necessarily think would be available with the final 3 picks of the draft. That's for sure. What did you think?
I thought I agree with you. The thing that stood out to me most about him was his intelligence. I thought he got to spots to block
Mm-hmm.
people rather than being like just blowing somebody off the football. I didn't think that was his game. I thought he got to spots really good though. I think like he understands leverage, which is a big part of offensive linemen,
Yep.
right? It's a massive part of it. It might be the biggest part of it. You could be able to drive someone back all you want, but leverage is a massive part of it. If you know, the ball's coming to your left side, you should be able to seal them off. And I think Forsyth, that's kind of his game. He does really good at that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you hear, he was a leader for the Ducks and all the years he was there, which is awesome. Now, do I think he's going to be a starter this year, guys? I hate to say it. I don't want to be this guy. No. If the Broncos thought he was a starter, they would have traded up earlier than the third pick, the third to last pick of the NFL draft in entirety. Like they would have moved up.
If he ends up starting, like it's tough because I guess like I'd kind of want that, but man, that really speaks to Lloyd. And then like in my mind, that just shows that they really made a mistake not investing in center and free agency. Like,
yeah,
because like if that like because like you're saying, like center, we talk about this. Center is one of those positions. It's one of the hardest positions. It takes like 3 to 4 years usually for like guys to kind of get into their swing. It's one of those positions where having a veteran is just such a prized possession for a lot of these teams. You see these teams with these young up and coming quarterbacks, or when they make a big free agent quarterback acquisition, they go get themselves a veteran center because that relationship is such an important part of your offense. It's literally it's the brain of your offense. They do the offensive line. Usually your quarterback's doing the rest of your team. You know, the quarterback picks up some line calls, whatever. Having a rookie starting at that spot after the year after your team just gave up the most sacks in the league is just like this is a
and
recipe.
not just a rookie, but a 7th round rookie.
Yeah,
So
like
about it.
I'm not trying, and that's not me trying to bash Forsyth, who I do like and I do think has potential to eventually become something. That's just putting such high expectations on him. And I think just shows such an error by the front office to not go out and get an upgrade, a true upgrade to Lloyd. Because again, maybe Alex comes into training camp and just outplays Lloyd and ends up being the starting center for the next however long. But like the odds of that are just so low, and that can't be the process of like your team. If you're just like, oh, I know how we'll fix the center position. We'll have this guy that didn't work out last year and hasn't worked out for the past 3 years compete with the third to last pick in the draft, and one of them I'm sure will end up being good enough. You know, like that's just not a great process.
It's not a great process
No.
at all. It isn't. Now, here's the other thing that needs to be said. That, Frankie, is so rare for a 7th rounder to just come in and be a starter right away. That if he were to come in and be quality depth right away, I'm grading this pick an A.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It is
100%.
If he were to come in and be quality depth, the odds are so stacked against him at pick 257 that it is an A. That's I just want to put it in the realm of what this means. Like for all the people that are saying he is a starter, no, depth A.
Yeah. And
That's what it is.
if in a year from now he's like because I think that should be the goal. Have him be a decent enough depth piece that he can be rotational at all three spots. And then next year, when you're trying to find as you know, we're probably going to talk about so much over the next year, as you're trying to steal money at these little positions, maybe Alex Forsyth has developed enough over the past year playing in an NFL conditioning and strength program, working with NFL offensive line coach, that maybe next year you are comfortable playing him as your starting center. That's completely possible. But just year one, having him be your starter seems like such a reach. You know, it feels like such a grasping at straws moment that I just don't think it's possible. I think it really is Lloyd written in a week one as your center at this point, as much as I don't think it's the best idea. And I really hope he's improved. But like, I think that's just kind of the way it stands right now.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Before we sign off here, I have one more question, and it's going to be completely not even related to Forsyth here. I forgot to ask you this during our Marvin Mims section.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have KJ Hamler or Marvin Mims as a better prospect coming out of the draft? Which one do you like more? KJ Hamler coming out of Penn State, Marvin Mims coming out of Oklahoma.
Probably KJ Hamler.
Yeah,
KJ, I liked KJ a lot.
I did too. I would be the same way. Although I think Marvin has a better chance. He has a more prototypical NFL game than KJ did coming up, but I loved KJ. I thought he was a great pick.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked KJ Hamler. I'm right in the same boat with you, but maybe
I think what's tough too, and like I don't know, this is gonna sound like I'm scouting the helmet, not the player so much, but like we see so many of these, like I don't want to say undersized, but smaller framed Oklahoma 4.4, 4.3, you know, these outside inside versatile speed threat guys that don't end up working out, because there is just such a difference between playing in the Big 12 and playing in the NFL that, like, I guess that's just where it gives you pause. And I mean, again, it's not like you've seen KJ up to this point necessarily get to have the most luck either, but like I guess that's just kind of where what sets me apart a little bit for those two in my mind too, where I feel like KJ did more for me, where I feel like, I don't know, in
different
my brain,
players.
like Mims is just, you hate to say it, but another one of those Big 12 speed threats.
Totally. If I were to compare him, KJ Hamler was quicker in and out of his cuts, but KJ Hamler is truly elite at that. Coming out,
KJ Hamler can release too. Like he has some really nice release packages. I thought that was a big part of his game as well.
Is a man beater coming out of Penn State. There wasn't a guy that was guarding him and make it. You're not
like I had no issue with KJ playing on the outside. Mims, I do have concerns about playing on the outside a little bit.
Yeah. But Frankie, I think that wraps up our show today. I hope everyone enjoyed it. If you're watching the show afterwards, please make sure you're following the Let's Talk Broncos podcast. You just subscribe to the YouTube. You guys aren't subscribing enough. Please help us.
Subscribe, like, leave comments.
Yeah, tell your friends that we're the best Broncos podcast of all time. But Frankie, where can they also follow your work?
Frankie's Film, Twitter, Frankie's Film NFL on TikTok, on here every Thursday. Listen to me and Joey. Next week, we're doing the rest of the AFC West so we can figure out what our rivals did in their draft classes. I don't think any of them really had too great of a draft, which actually kind of excites me. I remember, like, each of their first-round picks, I was really holding my breath. And I was like, okay, you know, like, that sucks, but it could have been a lot worse, you know. But we'll get all into all that next week, so make sure you're tuning back in. Irish NFL show. I'm on there once a week, so make sure you're checking that out. I get some good interviews, get to ask some good questions about draft stuff, the league, and the such. Joey, where can they find all your wonderful stuff?
Everybody, just find my work at the Let's Talk Broncos. Let's Talk Broncos has some exciting news coming up. So everybody keep your eyes peeled. We're going to keep you updated with that. If you're a true fan, we say it on every podcast, but it is coming up. It truly is. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then just for me personally, follow at JR Drafts. Also, Let's Talk Broncos has a Discord. Get involved in that. We're always in the Discord. We have an Instagram. Follow us on Instagram. We have a Facebook. Follow us on Facebook. Just follow us everywhere. Look up Let's Talk Broncos. But until next time, guys, go Broncos.